Thank you for watching the video. This is YouTube Medical University. If you have diabetes, sweets are bad. If you eat too much, you'll get diabetes. That's what people tend to say. This time, I will introduce recommended eating habits and 8 specific foods for people with diabetes or those at risk of developing it. Diabetes causes damage to various organs throughout the body due to high blood sugar levels. Atherosclerosis occurs because high blood sugar leads to the production of a substance called advanced glycation end products, AGEs, which damage blood vessels. As a result, you can develop vision problems that may lead to blindness, kidney problems that require dialysis, nerve damage that causes loss of sensation in your hands and feet, and you become more susceptible to infections. Diabetes can cause a variety of such complications. And it is said that a rapid rise in blood sugar levels itself can cause atherosclerosis, even if you don't have diabetes. In other words, if you eat the wrong way or mainly eat foods that easily raise your blood sugar, your blood vessels may become clogged in the future, making you more likely to experience various health problems. At YouTube Medical University, we provide reliable information from the perspective of doctors who actually diagnose and treat diabetes, so you can become healthier starting tomorrow. Because of how hospitals are structured, they receive medical fees for diagnosing and treating illnesses after you become sick. However, what's really important is not just treating diseases, but also preventing them in the first place. Detecting illnesses early is important. We've shared information to help you find diseases before symptoms appear so you can stay healthy and vibrant. If you like, I'd be happy if you could subscribe to my channel now so you don't miss any new videos. Now here's today's agenda. First, in the first section, I'll introduce 3 dietary methods to prevent arteriosclerosis. Then, in the second section, I'll introduce 8 dietary methods to help control sudden spikes in blood sugar levels. And from the third section onward, I'll answer questions I often get from diabetic patients during outpatient visits, such as, "Doctor, is it bad to eat fruit? How much fruit can I eat?" I'll be addressing those kinds of questions. So, in the third section, I'll introduce 2 ways to eat fruit without raising your blood sugar. And in the fourth section, I'll talk about what kinds of fruit you should actually eat, and introduce 4 recommended fruits. By watching this video until the end, whether you have diabetes or not, you'll learn how to prevent sudden spikes in blood sugar and understand specifically what and how much you should eat. I've made this video to help you with that. This may be a bit long, but I'd appreciate it if you listen to the end. Now, in the first part, I'll introduce 3 dietary methods to prevent arteriosclerosis. 3 dietary methods to prevent arteriosclerosis. The first one is practicing Vegemite first. Those of you who are health conscious may have heard of the term veggie first. I actually do this myself as well. Veggie first means that when you eat a meal, you start by eating vegetables first. By doing this, you can prevent a rapid spike in blood sugar levels, which is called a blood sugar spike. There is data supporting this. It makes sense because dietary fiber is not digested and reaches the intestines. That's why your blood sugar doesn't rise quickly. So first you fill your stomach with vegetables and then you eat quickly absorbed foods like carbohydrates afterward. That way, it's easy to understand that the rise in blood sugar levels becomes more gradual, right? In fact, in a study conducted on Japanese people when they ate their meals normally, the normal group and the veggie first group had different results. Blood sugar rose more gradually in the veggie first group. And what's important to note here is not just practicing veggie first, but also chewing each bite thoroughly about 20 times. In other words, taking your time to eat. This study focused on eating foods with a low glycemic index value, which don't raise blood sugar easily, so along with veggie first, the time spent eating. And let's also remember about the glycemic index value. I'll talk about glycemic index values in more detail in the fruit section during the 4th part of the video. I think many of you have heard about this so far. However, recent studies have shown that along with veggie first, there is actually one more thing you should eat first. That's protein. In a Japanese study, they compared a group that ate white rice first to one that didn't. They compared a group that ate canned mackerel or beef first. As a result, the group that ate mackerel or beef first, rather than white rice, had a slower rise in blood sugar levels. Based on these results, I advise people to make a conscious effort to eat protein along with vegetables first. I think it's easy to remember if you call it vegetan first. Please give it a try, everyone. Protein is usually in the side dishes, right? If you start with the side dishes, you might think you'll have to eat just plain white rice at the end. I feel the same way. So for example, you can add shredded salad chicken or put some cheese on your salad. If you make a salad with vegetables and tofu and try to eat vegetables and protein together, the volume of vegetables increases. It takes longer to eat, so you naturally eat vegetables and protein first. That's why I recommend this method. Please try it. Here is the second of the 3 dietary methods to prevent arteriosclerosis: eating 3 proper meals a day. Some of you might think, isn't it obvious to eat 3 meals a day? I wouldn't introduce something that's just common sense. According to a certain study, they gathered 22 patients with type 2 diabetes. They examined how blood sugar levels rose when the patients ate 3 meals a day versus when they ate only 2 meals a day, skipping breakfast and only eating lunch and dinner. Even though the calories per meal were the same, the blood sugar levels after eating lunch and dinner, when breakfast was skipped, were higher than usual. In other words, by skipping breakfast, the surprising result was that even if you eat the same food later, the way your blood sugar rises changes. Let me explain the medical side of this in simple terms. When we eat rice, it gets broken down into a type of sugar called glucose. When glucose is absorbed into the bloodstream, it becomes blood sugar. High blood sugar can cause diabetes. Insulin is the hormone that lowers blood sugar. Insulin is a hormone that comes from the pancreas. Insulin doesn't actually break down the glucose. Its role is to move the glucose from the blood into the cells that need nutrients. That's what insulin does. Try to imagine how the pancreas and the cells feel. If breakfast doesn't come, since the body is in a state of starvation, when lunch finally comes, you eat quickly, absorb it, and your body works hard to raise your blood sugar. As a result, your blood sugar rises rapidly and the pancreas is surprised because your blood sugar suddenly shot up. Thinking that it needs to lower your blood sugar, your body releases a lot of insulin all at once, causing your blood sugar to drop rapidly. As shown in this illustration, your blood sugar rises sharply and then falls sharply. This is how a blood sugar spike occurs. I think it's easier to understand and remember if you also consider the reason behind it. And it's said that these blood sugar spikes are a cause of arteriosclerosis. So, skipping meals and then suddenly overeating makes it easier for your blood sugar to rise. Please, even on busy mornings, try to eat the foods and fruits I'll introduce next. Here is the third dietary method to prevent arteriosclerosis. It's about eating a balanced diet. Some may think, isn't eating 3 balanced meals a day obvious? But even when told, it's not that easy, is it? So, how good is eating a balanced diet for your health really? If you understand the reasons behind it, you'll realize its importance and feel motivated to incorporate it into your daily life. There's a study from Japan about this. When it comes to meals, if you eat an unbalanced diet, like eating only carbohydrates or eating carbohydrates and protein together, when you eat carbohydrates and fats together, there's a study that looked into whether there's a difference in blood sugar levels with these 3 patterns. I'm sure many of you can already guess the results. Only the group that ate an unbalanced meal of just carbohydrates had a rapid spike in blood sugar after eating. Those who ate carbohydrates along with protein or fat, for the other groups, the rise in blood sugar was much more gradual. What do you think about that? It's not just about eating vegetables first. Actually, having protein and fat together with your meal is important for your blood sugar levels. Earlier, I mentioned vegetan first, right? In other words, it's important to eat not just carbohydrates, but also vegetables, protein, and fat together. That's what I think we can say. Nutritionists and health programs on television often say, let's eat a balanced diet and have 3 meals a day. And the reason for that is because there is data like this. Isn't it interesting when you learn the reasons behind it? This is a review of the first lesson. Here are 3 dietary ways to prevent arteriosclerosis. First, I introduced veggie and protein first instead of just veggie first. Second, I stressed eating 3 solid meals a day, not skipping breakfast. And then, not just carbohydrates. I also explained that eating protein and fat with your meal helps prevent a rapid rise in blood sugar. Fasting with just 1 meal a day or mini fasts has become popular, but some may question if it's truly healthy. I've made a video on this before and will link it in the description. Check it out if you're interested. In the second period, what kind of foods should you actually eat, specifically? I'll introduce 8 foods that I recommend. The foods I'm introducing this time were chosen based on how much they raise blood sugar, how easy and affordable they are, and how easy they are to include in your meals. Please use this as a reference. This time, I'll introduce 8 foods, and half of them, 4, are sources of protein. Then I'll recommend 2 vegetables and 1 carbohydrate. And finally, I'll introduce a fruit. The first of my 8 recommended ways to control blood sugar spikes is natto. When you think of Japanese people, you think of natto. This natto is a superfood. I eat natto almost every day when I have lunch. Natto contains something called pectin. It contains nutrients that are believed to help suppress the rise in blood sugar levels. Also, natto is a source of protein, right? The protein in soybeans is said to have a good balance of amino acids. And that's not all. Natto is also rich in vitamins and minerals. There's even a substance called nattokinase that is believed to help thin the blood. As I mentioned in the first class, it's very important to consume protein along with carbohydrates. Prices are going up, but sometimes you can get a pack of 3 natto for less than 100 yen. Why not try eating 1 pack a day? The second method for controlling rapid spikes in blood sugar is chicken. I've emphasized this many times before on YouTube Medical University. I've explained that you should eat chicken rather than red meat. What's the difference between red meat and white meat? Actually, red meat, meaning beef and pork and especially processed products. Processed foods like ham, hamburg steak and sausages are said to increase the risk of colon cancer. Of course, it's not that eating them at all is a risk, but eating a certain amount is said to increase the risk of colon cancer, so please be careful. On the other hand, chicken is not associated with these risks, and among meats, it's said to have less fat and more protein. Chicken breast and tenderloin are especially recommended. When they're on sale at the supermarket, you can get them for less than 100 yen per 100 grams. You can add them to salads or use minced chicken in stir-fried dishes. There are many ways to cook them. Protein tends to be expensive or lacking, so please try to include it in your diet consciously. The third way to prevent a rapid rise in blood sugar is with eggs. Although the price of eggs has gone up a lot, I included them because they're still easy to incorporate into your daily meals. Eggs are often called a complete nutritional food, aren't they? Eggs are said to provide a well-balanced intake of nutrients because they contain carbohydrates, protein, fat, and many vitamins. So you can get a good balance of nutrients just by eating one. One thing to be careful about is that eggs don't contain dietary fiber, so you'll need to get that from other sources. Earlier I mentioned that it's better to have carbohydrates and protein together, right? For example, fried eggs or raw egg over rice make good combinations. With a veggie and protein first approach, add chopped boiled eggs to salad. Eggs can be used in many ways. Dishes. To make sure you use them intentionally, you can set a rule for yourself to eat at least 1 egg a day. Expanding your egg dish options may help keep your blood sugar from rising too high. My recommendation, which I often did when I was busy in college, is to boil about 10 eggs at once in a pot and store them in the refrigerator. You should be careful about the salt content, but I also recommend keeping them as seasoned eggs. Boiled eggs are great for busy mornings, as a snack when you're a little hungry, or as an extra dish for dinner. Try making and storing them smartly and add them to your routine. Here's the fourth tip for eating habits to prevent rapid blood sugar spikes. Canned mackerel. I've introduced canned mackerel many times before. The nutrients found in mackerel. The oil in mackerel is actually good for your body. Oils are divided into saturated fatty acids and unsaturated fatty acids. Saturated fatty acids are mostly found in salad oil, butter, and the fat in red meat. Unsaturated fatty acids are the smooth oils found in fish, as well as in olive oil and flaxseed oil. Saturated fatty acids tend to raise cholesterol and neutral fat levels, while unsaturated fatty acids are expected to help stabilize or even lower cholesterol. And mackerel is considered a superfood. It is rich in unsaturated fatty acids called docosahexaenoic acid and eicosapentaenoic acid. And there is data showing that the more fish you eat, the lower your risk of arteriosclerosis, which is the clogging of blood vessels in the heart and brain. It's said that even eating just 100 grams a week can have a positive effect. In other words, by eating canned mackerel, you not only get protein and slow down the rise in blood sugar, but the eicosapentaenoic acid and docosahexaenoic acid also work to lower the risk of your heart and brain blood vessels becoming clogged. Canned mackerel in water can be stored for a long time. Even on busy days, it's easy to include in your meals. And since mackerel has a concentrated umami flavor, it actually tastes great when mixed with things like pasta. If you think this sounds good, pause the video and buy canned mackerel to try it. Here's the fifth way to eat to avoid a rapid blood sugar spike. Among vegetables, it's broccoli. Actually, broccoli was recently recognized as an essential vegetable for the country and was designated as a specified vegetable. It's the first time in half a century since potatoes. Broccoli has become a specified vegetable. But putting that aside, why did I point out broccoli? Actually, among vegetables, broccoli is high in protein. For example, per 100 grams cabbage has 1.2 grams, carrots have 0.7 grams, and green peppers also have 0.7 grams. In contrast, broccoli contains 5 grams. By the way, even rice, which is a carbohydrate, only contains 2.5 grams. In other words, by eating broccoli, you can effectively get protein as well. After all, protein is hard to get in large amounts, so it's important to get as much as you can from a variety of foods. Although I haven't mentioned it in this video, taking in about as many grams of protein as your body weight is important for preventing frailty. This means your body and legs weaken, muscle strength drops, fall risk rises, and you may need nursing care. It lowers the risk of these problems. That's one of the reasons why I recommend a lot of protein. When it comes to getting protein from vegetables, broccoli is the answer. But that's not all. Broccoli is actually quite a well-balanced vegetable in terms of nutrition. It contains concentrated amounts of nutrients like vitamin B, vitamin C, vitamin E, vitamin K, as well as iron and potassium. Recently, frozen broccoli has been sold at convenience stores and wholesale supermarkets. Even when you don't have time to boil it, you can use frozen broccoli. You can buy it ahead of time and add it to your lunchbox, or have it as a breakfast side. I recommend these ideas and do this myself. Here is the 6th way to control rapid spikes in blood sugar levels. Wakame. When you think of wakame, you probably think of dried wakame. Even a small amount will expand a lot when you soak it in water. Actually, wakame might look like it doesn't have any nutrients, but it's actually really excellent. That's what we call soluble dietary fiber. There are 2 types of dietary fiber, soluble and insoluble. Both are important, but insoluble fiber, as the name suggests, doesn't dissolve, so it passes through your body and helps improve bowel movements. And soluble dietary fiber dissolves in water, softens your stool, and also serves as nutrition for your intestines, helping to balance your gut bacteria. But that's not all. In fact, there are reports suggesting that it may also help slow the rise in blood sugar levels. Since soluble dietary fiber is actually quite difficult to get enough of, that's why I recommend wakame, which is easy to include in your diet. Foods that contain soluble dietary fiber tend to have a slightly slimy or sticky texture, like wakame or okra. And as I mentioned earlier, foods like natto also contain it, so please try to include these in your diet. I also recommend mixing natto and okra together to eat. This helps prevent a rapid spike in blood sugar levels. The 7th of the 8 recommended eating methods is this: mochi barley. Everyone, you probably think that carbohydrates tend to raise blood sugar levels easily, right? That image is correct. You should watch your carbohydrate intake. Rice, noodles and bread taste great, but overeating them can raise your blood sugar. Among carbohydrates, you especially need to watch out for white carbohydrates, things like white rice, bread, and white noodles such as udon or salmon. These carbohydrates are refined, for example with rice, the bran part is removed. What we call white carbohydrates are those that have been made into pure carbohydrates only. In other words, because they're pure, they tend to raise your blood sugar levels more easily. For these reasons, when it comes to carbohydrates that don't cause a rapid spike in blood sugar, I recommend brownish carbohydrates. That's why I introduced barley instead of white rice. It's also said that using whole wheat bread instead of regular bread, or choosing noodles like soba that contain bran, makes it harder for your blood sugar to rise. Have you all ever tried barley? I usually eat rice with a bit of barley mixed in with white rice. Actually, barley is quite chewy, and it has a slightly popping texture, which makes it really delicious. It's hard to eat if it's all barley, but if you mix it with white rice at a good ratio, about 2 to 1, it becomes really delicious and easy to eat. When you think of healthy rice, you might think of brown rice, and of course brown rice is great, but barley is even better. Brown rice only contains about 3 grams of dietary fiber per 100 grams, but barley actually contains about 1-3 grams. That's obviously a lot more, right? And to add to that, barley is also less likely to raise your blood sugar, as I mentioned earlier. It has a high proportion of soluble dietary fiber. In other words, it contains a lot of fiber, causes a slower rise in blood sugar, and thanks to the soluble fiber, it can improve bowel movements and help reduce blood sugar spikes. Try adding it to your diet tomorrow. Here's the 8th tip for preventing rapid blood sugar increases. It's fruit. You might be thinking, if you have diabetes, aren't you not supposed to eat fruit? I think a lot of people feel that way, but that's not actually how I advise my patients. What's important is the total calories. It's true that fruit contains a lot of sugar, so the calories can add up quickly. However, if you eat the right amount, fruit is rich in fiber, vitamins and minerals, so I actually recommend including it in your diet. So, in the 4th period, I'll introduce recommended ways to eat fruit. Let's review what we covered in the 3rd period. Here are 8 foods that help control blood sugar levels: natto, chicken breast, eggs, canned mackerel, broccoli, wakame seaweed and barley. And I also introduced fruit. And in the 3rd part, I'll introduce 2 tips on how to include fruit in your diet to help control blood sugar levels. How can you keep your blood sugar from rising? Here are 2 ways to eat fruit. The first is to include it in your breakfast. Just hearing about fruit in the morning gives you a healthy image, doesn't it? What happens if you eat this at night? At night, you're just going to sleep afterward. So even if your blood sugar rises, it won't be converted into energy. The excess calories will just be stored as fat in your body. If you think about it that way, you're going to work, do housework, or use your brain from now on. So how about actively eating fruit during times when you're going to be burning calories? Fruits are also rich in water. When you're busy, it's hard to find time to drink water. At times like that, by eating fruit, you can take in water and minerals, so I try to eat fruit in the morning. It also helps control the rise in blood sugar levels. The second way to eat fruit is to have it instead of snacks. Actually, compared to sweet chocolate, fruit is of course lower in calories. If you compare them by grams, even eating just half a chocolate bar is higher in calories than eating a whole apple. With a chocolate bar, even if you eat half, you might feel it's not enough and end up eating the whole thing. But how about eating a whole apple instead? It's pretty filling, and you might even feel like you don't need lunch anymore. In other words, fruit is not only satisfying, it also has a lot of water and is rich in dietary fiber, so including it as a snack can help prevent overeating. What do you think? If you thought that fruit isn't a good snack, try including it in moderation. Ask for the specific amount. Picture the amount of fruit that fits into a small bowl, not a large plate, just a small bowl's worth. Please keep that in mind. If you want to be more precise, it's said to be about 80 kilocalories, which is roughly 100 to 150 grams of fruit. That's about the same weight as a small bowl of rice. But since that might still be hard to picture, I'll introduce some specific fruits as examples next. Thank you for waiting. Finally, I'd like to introduce 4 recommended fruits that I personally include in my diet. Here is the first of my 4 recommended fruits. It's an apple. As I mentioned earlier, apples are quite filling, aren't they? Compared to other fruits, apples are relatively firm, which is one of their characteristics. And what's good about apples is that their glycemic index value, which indicates how quickly your blood sugar rises, is relatively low. In other words, a low glycemic index value means that even if you eat them, your blood sugar rises more gradually. A rapid rise in blood sugar increases arteriosclerosis risk, correct? So apples are seen as having a lower risk for that. And apples are sold at most regular supermarkets, right? They're not that expensive either. Because they're easy to incorporate into your diet, I recommend apples. As a general guideline, please limit yourself to 1 apple per day, even if you eat it every day. So you could cut it into thirds and eat a third in the morning, a third at lunch, and a third in the evening. The second fruit that helps control blood sugar levels is this one, the banana. When I was in college, I played tennis and would eat bananas between matches. Even now, I always keep bananas on hand. In outpatient clinics, I'm often asked, "Doctor, is it okay to eat bananas?" Bananas are inexpensive, easy to store, and convenient, aren't they? And bananas taste great when added to yogurt too. The reason I recommend bananas is because, like apples, they are considered foods with a relatively low glycemic index. Of course, compared to rice, bananas are absorbed more quickly, so I eat them during sports, but among all fruits, their glycemic index isn't particularly high. Furthermore, when it comes to the risk of arteriosclerosis, it's not just blood sugar levels, but also things like blood pressure that matter. Bananas are rich in potassium. Potassium is expected to have the effect of lowering blood pressure. For these reasons, bananas are rich in minerals compared to other fruits and can be expected to have a positive effect on blood pressure. That's why I recommend bananas. By the way, for people who have developed diabetes and whose kidneys have started to deteriorate, there are cases where potassium levels actually rise because the kidneys can't excrete it properly. People like that should be careful not to eat too many bananas and consult their doctor. Bananas help suppress blood sugar rises. Here are the third and fourth fruits in the top 4, kiwi and blueberries. Isn't that surprising? These two actually have something in common. These are fruits that are rich in dietary fiber. Both kiwi and blueberries, it's said that per 150 grams they contain about 3 to 5 grams of dietary fiber. For other fruits, even if they contain fiber, it's usually only about 1 gram. In other words, you can get 3 to 5 times more dietary fiber, and having dietary fiber means you can expect a more gradual rise in blood sugar levels. And furthermore, the carbohydrates found in fruit are made up of glucose, fructose, and sucrose. Glucose is the smallest unit, so eating it can raise your blood sugar the fastest. In comparison, fructose and sucrose are made up of glucose and other sugars linked together, so they need to be broken down by digestive enzymes before being absorbed. There's a time lag before your blood sugar rises, so the increase is more gradual. I know this was a bit technical, so it's okay if you forget the details. As for kiwi and blueberries have a higher proportion of fructose and sucrose compared to glucose, which raises blood sugar more easily. Because of this, people often say that fruit can raise your blood sugar quickly, but personally, I recommend foods like kiwi and blueberries because they contain dietary fiber as well as fructose and sucrose. Sometimes you can even find kiwis on sale for less than 100 yen each. And as for blueberries, I usually buy frozen ones at wholesale supermarkets or convenience stores. I eat them as they are, like ice cream instead of snacks. You can eat them frozen or thawed and mixed with yogurt. They're delicious both ways. Blueberries are also believed to benefit your eyes. And recently, various health benefits have been discovered. Please try to include them in your daily life. Let's review. Here are 4 fruits that help control blood sugar spikes. Apples and bananas, which have a low glycemic index value and are easy to include in your diet. Also, fruits that are high in dietary fiber and have a higher proportion of sucrose and fructose. I also introduced kiwi and blueberries. Please let me know in the comments if you have any fruits you include in your diet, or if you've noticed your blood sugar levels go down after eating certain foods. And finally, a common question I get is, what about fruit juice? What about dried fruit? When it comes to fruit juice, most of the dietary fiber and minerals are lost during the juicing process. Because of that, it ends up being mostly pure sugar, so it's generally recommended to eat whole fruits as they are. It's also pointed out that people who frequently drink fruit juice have a higher risk of diabetes, so it's best to stick to water, tea, or coffee for your beverages. And as for dried fruit, it may seem good because it's concentrated and you can get a lot of fruit at once, but in fact a lot of dried fruits have added sugars during processing. So make sure to carefully check the ingredient label on the back to see if it's natural dried fruit or if it's been processed. And it's better to eat fruit as it is because it contains more water, is more filling, and helps prevent overeating. So, even if you eat dried fruit, I usually advise people to enjoy it as a treat or a luxury item. How was it? This was a long video, but thank you for watching until the end. At YouTube Medical University, we make practical, easy to understand videos from a doctor's perspective to help you get healthier starting tomorrow. It's very important to prevent illness or detect it early before it develops. It's very important to have at least one trustworthy channel. Please subscribe so you don't miss any new videos. It really encourages us. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and share your experiences or what you learned in the comments. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. See you in the next video.